Hey, good morning. I'm John F. Gately. You can call me Jack, broadcasting to you from beautiful Plymouth, Massachusetts. Joining a little bit early today because we have a big inflation number that's coming up. I'm going to try to bring in Rick Santelli to actually share that screen with you when the announcement comes in just 2 minutes from now. So, or a minute and a half or whatever it is. So inflation coming up. Very concerned about inflation for 2025. If you heard me talk about that last year, at the end of last year, I was very concerned about our economic prospects for 2025 because to me, 1988 felt a lot like 2024 or the other way around, right? So, if you remember, for those of us who were around, 1989, the year after the presidential election, wasn't good. And I don't know if you've noticed, but mortgage rates are back up. Mortgage rates are back up. Let's see. Here we go. Here.
So much more with Norwegian Cruise Line.
Tear it up in Jamaica one day. 7.25. Hold on. Let's see CNBC in the background. There we go. Mortgage rates are now up to 7.25. And when you look at your 10-year, which drives the mortgage, you can also see that chart is moving higher since a low of late September. So, yeah, very, very scary on the interest rate situation. And what you don't want is what I think a lot of economists are starting to worry about, and that is a slowdown in jobs coupled with inflation, because that is the absolute worst case scenario. That's known as stagflation. Most of your major indices right at the moment are trending flat for this morning, although the Dow is expected to go up maybe like 200 points or something like that. Let's bring in Becky really quick, and look at some of these trending treasuries here. 4.9 for the 30, 4.7 for the 10-year. These are not good numbers.
Anticipated numbers for
and we're just waiting for Santelli to come up and join us any minute here. The last CPI rating, if I'm not mistaken, was 2.7, and I think we have that chart. We can bring that chart up here for you. Here you go.
Stand because producer prices don't necessarily indicate what you will see with consumer prices.
Mute that one more time. Maybe if I was better at this, I could mute it there. There is your chart of last time November 2.7. Remember, the official goal for these numbers is 2%.
Did make some hay with the short-term month-over-month on PPI, but the year-over-year was still sticky, well over 3%, even though some mild progress.
And remember, the goal is supposed to be 2%.
Today, we want to pay very close attention to year-over-year on retail inflation. And here we go. Consumer Price Index for December comes out up 0.4 on the headline, exactly as expected. To find a higher number than 0.4, you're going all the way back to August of 2023 when it was up 0.5%. Strip out the all-important food and energy, up 0.2, 1/10 cooler than we expected, 1/10 cooler than the rearview mirror, up 0.2. How does that comp? We equal July of 24. Find a lower number, you go back to June of 24. Year-over-year numbers, here we go. On the headline, year-over-year, up 2.9. As expected, and I always question how much more important as expected is to the fact that it's 0.2 higher than our last look, which was 2.7. To find a number higher than 2.9, you're going to June of last year. And finally, on the year-over-year core, it's 3.2%, 1/10 lighter than the rearview mirror, 1/10 lighter than expectations. But 3.2 is a little bit of progress. It equals where we were in August. Now, that equals August. To find a lower number, you're really going in the way back machine. You have to find a 3% number, and that's all the way back in April of 21. Now, many don't look at the indices. I look at the indices. This really says it all, okay? If you look at the CPI index, started in 1913, it now is 3 315.605. 315.605. That's the second highest number ever. The highest, the record, was October of 24. If you look at this, pretty much every month we make new all-time highs. So it's nice that we pulled back just a smidge. And if we look at the core, going all the way back to 1957.
CPI year over year at 2.9%. And if I'm not mistaken, if we look at our chart from the consumer year over year, we were at 2.7, as Rick Santelli just said. So this is not a cool report. This is a middling report to slightly warm.
And that's what these indices tell us, that virtually anybody out there watching that isn't an economist, they feel the pressure of rising prices. And it's a pressure that very much never seems to ease off. We don't normally see a lot of negative numbers. And speaking of negative numbers, there's one I haven't pointed out yet. Empire was also out. January number, kind of real time, minus 12.6. Minus 12.6 would be the weakest, going back
index,
to
I believe.
Minus 15 and change in May of last year. So we still see that manufacturing is a bit curtailed. Interest rates moving significantly lower here, significantly lower. Maybe it was the month-over-month core. Maybe it's the fact that we came in as or a little light on expectations, what the market prepared for. But like yesterday, we want to watch the secondary and tertiary.
Yeah, and that is kind of the danger of like worried about expectations. And Santelli's a lot worried about expectation because that's what moves the market. But I'm not really worried about expectations. I'm worried about how does this affect your wallet? And the bottom line from this report is inflation remains sticky at somewhere about 3%. And if you want to like translate that into real life, remember that the goal is 2%. Because the Fed believes they can steal 2% of your money every year and you won't complain that much. But actually, they're at 3% because they're doing such a good job. And if you just say to yourself, well, that's just 1%, well, actually, it's 50% off the goal. If you think about it like that, that's a much better way to think about it. And we'll see where mortgage rates settle down. But it strikes me that we're not going to be, we might close south of 7.25 today. But if you look at this chart and you look at where the government is spending, it's highly likely that we're going to be spending to oblivion for the near future, even with the Republican Congress, because so much of the spending is already locked in. And it's going to take, this is like turning an aircraft carrier, right? It is not something you do on a dime. Thank you so much for joining us today. All right. So I know you've seen it, but it's just so good. Yeah. I know you've seen it, but it's just so good. Let's just do it one more time.
For 10 years, you're not willing to make that same pledge?
I'm not a general, Senator.
You'll be.
It's just so good. I couldn't resist. Couldn't resist the cheap shot. I'm not a general, Senator. General Hegseth. Love that clip. Bill Melugin, he's going to factor into today's report for sure. He has some new monthly data on the Biden presidency revealing that since 2023, early 2023, his administration has now allowed 1.5 million migrants to enter the U.S. versus two controversial programs, one of which is very, very impactful here in Massachusetts. One is the mobile app known as CPB1, which basically you could just schedule your illegal immigration arrival. Oh, it's not illegal, Jack. We did it on the app. It's not illegal. Arrival. And then there's the CHNV, Migrant Flights Program, which is probably the number one reason why we had so many people sleeping at the airport. And that stands for, someone correct me if I'm wrong, Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, Venezuela. Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah, and if you went to the airport like I did many times last year, the Haitian population is probably all flying in on this parole program. 50. This is a number that's staggering. 531,000 migrant flights under the CHNV program, which Trump has vowed to terminate. Shocking. I mean, that's just amazing. A lot of those actually landed in Miami because it's the shortest flight from like Haiti, and then people got connecting flights from Miami. This might come as a complete shock to you, but one of the biggest starter or sources of fires out in Los Angeles were humans. And they found an illegal immigrant with a blowtorch who had a prior criminal record. Per law enforcement sources, this is the rap sheet for the illegal alien arrested with the blowtorch. It's longer than a CVS receipt. You know, actually, Bill, I just thought this was how you got into a Healey hotel. I thought this was just like, the rap sheet of any random person at a Healey hotel. But, well, what do I know? And it starts in November of 2016. And yeah, it's, as they say, as long as your arm, right? And it got a lot of really super bad things on there. It's not complimentary. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C., since we were talking about Pete Hegseth, our congressional delegation, Jim Lyons here, Massachusetts congressional Democrat delegation, all 9 of them voted against the Protection of Women and Girls Sports Act, which I believe the vote was yesterday. House passed the act, notwithstanding the fact that all 9 of our people voted against it. The Protection of Women and Girls Act, 218 to 206, with 2 Democrats joining the Republic. Oh, 2 Democrats. They had a moment. They had an epiphany. All right, good for them. The bill bans schools from allowing biological males from competing in women's sports. So that's very interesting, and I'm glad that happened. I would have voted for it myself, as probably you would have. But I think what's really super interesting is what is Massachusetts going to do with this bill. And we have a report from WBUR. Let's bring it up here. Because they have a very interesting way, and they have a fairly straightforward summary of what's happened here. Last spring, the Biden administration expanded Title V, or Title IX, I should say. But recently, a Kentucky judge struck down the rules. The latest separate, and that was last week, which we did not cover, but I think got a lot of coverage nationally. You probably heard about it. Separately, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives advanced a bill yesterday, which we just mentioned, that would revoke the federal funding for any school that allows transgender athletes to compete in K-12 girl sports. All 9 Democratic House members voted against the bill, including Seth Moulton, who apparently has now fallen back in line, right? Because Seth Moulton was off script. Right after the election. He got whacked around by the far left, and now apparently he's fallen back into line. So back to BUR. Some gratuitous quote from Lori Trahan. We'll skip that. What's next? And I think we go down to this bullet here. Massachusetts stands. And I really don't even understand this. Well, because the law has been struck down by the Kentucky federal judge. So it doesn't really matter how Massachusetts stands. Title IX is back to what I'll call pre-Biden. Biden's Title IX protections had already been paused by Republican challenges in 26 states. But as WBUR reports, nothing is set to change immediately in Massachusetts. During a meeting yesterday, Secretary of Education in Massachusetts, Patrick Tutwiler, said the state's constitution allows schools to continue to afford enhanced protections based upon gender identity and other characteristics, respective of our core values. Tutwiler added that the state will continue with the same protections. Ooh, that that kind of sounds a little insurrection-y, doesn't it? That seems to be in violation of the Kentucky judge. But, I'm not a lawyer, way too smart to go to law school. But maybe they're saying that the old standard that we have to comply with the federal standard, but we are free to go stricter than the federal standard. I know that happens in Massachusetts all the time, especially in real estate. Like there might be a federal standard that applies to 4 family units, owner occupied, but instead we're stricter and we only allow it to apply to 2-unit owner occupied, things like that. So it'll be interesting to find out whether this Biden Title IX approach will actually stand here in Massachusetts, because it seems as if that the Republican bill that just passed in the House, and should that pass in the Senate, would potentially strip Massachusetts of some school funding if the Healey administration continues with this approach to the Title IX restrictions that are referenced by Education Secretary Tutwiler. It seems as if they're on some type of collision course, So we're going to continue to watch that as we go along. And if you're not familiar with that, let's just bring up Nancy Mace real quickly.
Today we vote Congressman Greg Stubbe's bill to protect women and girls in sports. We cannot allow what happened to Riley Gaines and many other women and girls to ever happen again. We cannot and should not allow the left to force women and underage girls to undress in front of men in the locker room. And we certainly can't give away women's wins and women's rights in women's sports by allowing gender-confused, mentally ill men to compete against our women and girls. That is the vote we have just in a few minutes. And of course, I'm with American women and girls. Let's see how many Democrats and those on the far left and progressives hate American women and underage girls. Today we vote.
Only 2 Democrats voted with Nancy Mace. The rest of the 206 voted against girls, basically. On the way to vote for Greg Stubbe's bill to save women and girls sports, how many leftist members of the self-proclaimed party for women will actually vote to protect women today? That's a great question. And if I can just jump in here real quickly, can I interrupt myself and say that here in Massachusetts, if you were a candidate, and I missed the boat on this myself, if you were a candidate in 2024 and you didn't make girls' sports one of your top issues as a Republican candidate in Massachusetts, and you lost by a handful of, or you lost at all, you may have been able to win if you brought that. I'm just saying, right? Yeah, I think that was something that really worked for Trump in a lot of swing states, and he had an ad, right? And I think because we live in the bubble here, that is Massachusetts, it didn't occur to us because we don't even think of it as like something that we should talk about because the mainstream media is not talking about. But if we had really been on the ball, and again, I think I missed this myself, that should have been a more of a core issue for everybody running as a Republican in 2024. And I think a lot of us can point to the fact that we missed that. We missed that as a thing. All right, enough of Seth Moulton. Let's quickly, I love me some Michael Schellenberger, and what a report from him here. One of the best, Tucker recently just called him like the best journalist in the country. As fires raged, the LA mayor attended a cocktail party in Ghana. And all right, let's just stop right there. Like, what does managing the Los Angeles government have to do with Ghana? I don't know. But her deputy mayor of public safety was also unavailable. See how Massachusetts this sounds, because of an FBI raid at his house in connection to an investigation regarding a bomb threat he allegedly made against City Hall. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. Like, I'm not sure if they're copying us or we're copying them. Like, I can't figure it out. You don't know whether to laugh or cry at this point. Expected to be $250 billion in losses. This is the second time I've seen this picture of somebody took their untouched Volkswagen vintage bus and parked it amongst the rubble. And I've seen that. Maybe you've seen this picture here, and it is kind of startling. It kind of quintessential California vehicle. And if you've not seen this headline from the Post, posted up again by James Woods, the money these grifters made can be counted by the lives of our lost neighbors. We must have tribunals, and there must be a reckoning. Bonfire of the vanity. How Newsom cut fire prevention and spent big on green energy deals. Green energy deals. We've talked a lot about that here in Massachusetts for sure. A happy note as we finish off our topics nationally, and then we're going to dive into things Massachusetts. Flags will fly at full, what I call mast or staff, for the Trump inauguration, right? If I just rant for a quick second, I am not a fan of lowering. It's become a fad, and I blame both Democrats and Republicans of this, for lowering the flag, like for almost everything. And I really believe that the flag should only be lowered and in times of distinct national mourning, like 9/11, the death of a president. I'm okay with that, but not for weeks on end. And there's another reason why that escapes me. But let me just sum it up. For a limited application only. It should be limited. Otherwise, the flag should fly high. That's just my feeling about it. And it seems as if every state representative that died, and they haven't been in office for 20 years. Oh, got to lower the flag. Got to lower the flag for some state rep hack that got his job at Bridgewater State College afterward. And we're all sad when everyone's driving around. Why are the flags at half mast? No, flag back up. The flag should only fly half for very limited times. Otherwise, it should be flying that proud every day, except for some very, very narrow applications. All right, Massachusetts Republicans. I mentioned this to you yesterday, but I was not going to trek to the State House to cover this. But we'll mention it today. House and Senate Republicans on Tuesday proposed changes to course correct the state shelter system amid public safety concerns and mounting costs, while calling on Maura Healey to step up the frequency of communication. At a press conference, they released their omnibus legislation, which would respond to the 2017 Lund decision by allowing state courts and law enforcement to honor U.S. immigration detainers for violent offenders. So I don't know if this is really anything new, but I'm glad to see that they're actually coming together to speak as one. That's a good thing. That is a good thing. I don't know if I've seen it quite as deliberate as we did yesterday from the House and Senate Republicans in Massachusetts. So I'm glad to see that they're kind of, coming together on some type of omnibus legislation. Glanced at that story. I've not dived deep, and that's why we're not going to dive deep, because I'm not going to bring you something that I don't know about. But I'm getting my gut reaction once again. We covered this, is that it's not extensive enough, that it's still going upon the theory that it's just a management problem and not a strategic flaw. And let me tell you, it's a strategic flaw, and it is beyond. You see, on Beacon Hill, there's a lot there. Whenever someone comes up and says we have a problem with the program, the vested interests always come up with the spin that we can reform it, don't repeal it. that this is a long-term strategy to keep a program. Let's reform it. Don't repeal it. No, the emergency housing thing cannot be saved. Conceptually, it's a strategic failure. What should come out of it is we should scrap that. Someone needs to file a bill to scrap the bill in that section of law entirely. And if they want to replace it with some much smaller program to protect people fleeing domestic violence, I'd be fine with that. But otherwise, this is beyond reform, beyond repair, and it's not a management problem at this point. It's a let's get rid of it problem. By the way, shout out to the Maine Republicans. Look at this up in Maine. They're showing how to lead. There's a budget up there that includes 5 new taxes. And look at this. The Republicans in Maine,
as you can see in front of me,
they're all going to vote against it.
Not hard math. 1 new budget, 5 new taxes so far that we are aware of equals 0 Republican votes. Republicans are not going to be supporting any budget that's going to be raising taxes on Maine people.
You shouldn't. And it's just, the way I look at it, if you're in the minority party, no matter what minority party you are, if you're in the minority party, you shouldn't vote for the budget written by the majority party. Democrats are always telling us that the budget reflects our values. So if the Democrats are writing the budget, which respects our values, why should any Republicans or members of the minority be voting for Democrat values? That just doesn't make sense. Because if you do that, you're not really part of the minority, are you? All right, up next. Good job, Maine Republicans. Maybe that thinking will start to trickle down. And going along with the shelter story, this House Budget Chief Aaron Mickelwitz, I should know. I don't know him, but I knew his predecessor. But he said he wants to see more info on crimes committed in state-run shelters. Paging Amy Carnevale. Amy, you should probably print up the 3,000 pages. If I was you, Amy, this would be me. Kind of like I would do the stunt. You know what I'm going to say? Print up the 3,000 pages and drop it off at his office. It's worth the press, right? It's worth the free press. He wants more information. Take that big thing, bring it over to, well, they don't have Copy Cop, but FedEx Kinko's, and print up the 3,000 pages and make a thing out of it, dropping it off at his office. That would be worth it. I would, if I was the chairman of the master. Yeah, that's what I would do. Yeah. So Revere City Councilor says the state's right to shelter law is the perfect example of how woke ideologies are harmful, as he addressed the arrest of a migrant who allegedly had an AR-15 and 5 kilos of fentanyl at a local hotel. Anthony Zambuto said the right to shelter law, which is not a right to shelter. We got to stop calling it the right to shelter. Right is something that's like in the Constitution, imbued by God. We have a shelter law which could be repealed. It's not a right to shelter. It's a shelter law. Set that aside, Harold. It was meant for citizens, but when the good intentions go awry, because we all want to be woke and we want to feel good and we feel like we're doing the right thing, that's where we go wrong. Oh my God, Anthony Zambuto. I feel like, I don't know. I've never heard of this guy, but I feel like writing him a check today. I'll tell you that. Can we run this guy for some higher up? Maybe he actually is running for higher up. I don't know. Zambuto's comments came as, the 28-year-old Dominican illegal immigrant was living at the Quality in Revere. Leonardo Anjuar Sanchez, who's now facing state and federal charges. Way to go, Councilor Zambuto. Again, I don't know whatever your other policies are, but I'm liking what I'm reading. Zambudo voiced his stance, adding he's hopeful President Trump retaking office will end woke policies minutes before the council approved a motion seeking a meeting with state housing officials and personnel from the Healey administration. So good job, Councilor Zambudo. I don't know what other things that you supporting, but I'm liking how you're sounding on this. Meanwhile, back in Boston, or is this Los Angeles? It's hard to keep track. Prosecutors of Boston City Councilor TFA asked for evidence to be filed under seal. Yeah. Look at that was a great photo, by the way. Who did this photo? That is by Stuart Cahill. See how he caught her like looking straight into the lens? Great job. Yeah, good job. Prosecutors are seeking to release their evidence in the kickback case of TFA under seal as the large number of documents are rife with personal identification information. In other words, like there's so many documents, they're saying, I guess, it would be difficult to redact them. So maybe we might not get the information, because that would be just like a treasure trove of excitement to get all the background documents. Like that'd be a lot of fun, but it doesn't sound like we're going to get it. Also in Boston, good job, Mayor Wu. 20-year-old Braintree man facing sex trafficking charges after he was busted near Mass and Cass, according to the Suffolk DA's office. Nothing to see here. Move along, folks. Which brings us to the bigger story that is all over the interwebs this morning. Mayor Wu just had a baby. Congratulations. Good for you. Added, not only did she add a person to the world, but she added 300 new positions to Boston City Hall amid a budget crunch. And, I think that this chart, which was posted up by one of my followers, I'm not even sure how to say their name, but you can see it there. You follow them if you want. They post up some interesting stuff. Boston population is down to what it was over a decade ago in 2013 after peaking in 2018. Yet Wu adds 300 employees. Make it make sense. And that's like a great observation. Why do you need 300 more employees if your population is declining? Right? That's a really good question. Right? If you peaked at about 695,000 people, which is still way off. I think we used to have more, over 700,000. But now we're down to 655. Why are you growing? And then there is my favorite economist, Professor St. Ange, who I remember this story from December of last year. An Auburn University study says every single regulator destroys 158 private sector jobs every year. You keep him on the job. Oh my God, he gendered somebody. Keep him on the job. With nearly 300,000 federal regulators, the shock is that we still have any jobs at all. In other words, by hiring 300 employees, you're sucking resources out of the productive private sector. Get it? And if there was a problem in the city where you had a misallocation of resources, you could have pared down some departments or shifted people to different departments. But instead, what it appears that Mayor Wu did was just simply add jobs, without actually being efficient about it. This is our next story. Let me just glance here and make sure no one's angry at me. I still have a couple more minutes. Plan does not rely on new tax revenue. Healey proposes $8 billion in investment in transportation over 10 years. So there was an important tweet by, no, I guess I don't have it, but Effectively, this is a bailout, which is what Mass Fiscal was calling it. Maybe their quote is further down here. But look at all these happy faces. Look at all these happy faces. I'm guessing that some of the people who the government is going to give contracts to over the next 10 years with this $8 billion are in this photo. These people are happy because somehow some of that money is going to trickle down to them. Yeah, that's exactly what's going to happen. The Bay State will spend upwards of $8 billion over the next 10 years, according to Governor Healey, speaking at Worcester Union Station. I love train stations, by the way. I've not been to the Worcester train station. How are we going to do that? Oh, let me scroll down here. Devil's in the details. Healey's proposal would pay for the investment using $765 million from the so-called millionaires tax. Okay, now what's going to happen when the millionaires finally move out of state, right? What's going to happen? So they're expecting, as someone said in my timeline the other day, they responded, what they really mean is hoping, because if you start building based upon that millionaire tax being a constant, you're probably setting yourself up for disappointment. So this is what they're going to do. They're going to take some of the millionaires tax money, tax, in FY 2026. And these funds, look at the euphemism, these funds would be used to maximize fair share through borrowing to yield $5 billion over the next 10 years for capital investment bonds in railroad, bridges, culverts. In other words, we're not paying for these investments as we go along. We're borrowing more money, sacrificing our financial security of the future, sacrificing our children, grandchildren. We're borrowing against our kids and our grandchildren's earnings. We're taxing our grandchildren. We're taxing our kids so that we can have roads and bridges today rather than try to pay for them at some point. We're leveraging a higher tax on millionaires, which we cannot depend upon. And then we're going to borrow again. Stop me if you think that this is like a setup for failure, because it sounds like a bailout, really, for the MBTA, amongst other things. And it also sounds like having a master's degree in public management, state and municipal finance. I'm doing everything I can to refrain from going down how stupid a road this is fiscally, because this is a video that I actually want you to watch. But this is a really bad idea. Let's just put it that way, especially with all the borrowing we've already done for the housing bond bill, for the economic development bill, where the government is picking winners and losers. We have a very high debt burden here in Massachusetts, and this is more debt that you, your kids, and your grandchildren have to pay for, all in the idea that this is going to spur some type of economic development. Not liking that idea. All right. Somebody said, Mary says, the Pete Hegseth clip is the best clip ever. Yeah, couldn't help but show that one more time. All right, listen, super busy day here. I got to go. You have a great day. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.